Have you ever had that one neighbor who thinks they own the whole neighborhood? The kind that causes trouble, and acts like they're the boss. Well, if you have, leave a comment and let us know. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so I can keep bringing you more stories like this one. Now, let's dive into today's story. HOA Karen keeps running over my driveway lights, so I got her some light. Alex had always thought his neighborhood was a quiet, peaceful place where everyone respected each other's space. But that all changed when Sandra moved in next door. From the moment she arrived, it was clear that she thought the rules didn't apply to her. With her oversized SUV, she would cruise down the street, practically bulldozing everything in her path. One of the first signs of trouble was when Alex noticed his driveway lights had started breaking repeatedly. At first, he chalked it up to bad luck or maybe the occasional car bumping into them. But as the weeks went by, he began to notice a pattern. Every time Sandra backed out of her driveway, his lights would be shattered. The damage wasn't accidental. It was deliberate. Like she was purposefully running them over. Alex tried to brush it off, thinking it was just a mistake. But after the third or fourth time, he couldn't ignore it any longer. He went outside, expecting to see a minor crack or chip. But instead, his lights were completely destroyed. The frustration built up. And that's when Alex decided to take action. He couldn't just let her walk all over him, especially when she was clearly treating his property like her own personal obstacle course. One morning, after another set of lights lay shattered on his driveway, Alex decided enough was enough. With a deep breath, he walked across the lawn to Sandra's house, ready to have a conversation. He knocked on her door, feeling a mix of frustration and determination. Sandra answered with an exaggerated smile, clearly more annoyed at the interruption than concerned about the situation. "Hey, Sandra," Alex started, trying to keep his voice calm. "I noticed my driveway lights are broken again. I think you might have run over them while pulling out of your driveway." Sandra didn't even look up from her phone. She adjusted her sunglasses and let out a dismissive laugh. "Oh, those things? They were in my way." She waved a hand as if it was the least important thing on earth. "Maybe you should move them." Alex's jaw clenched. "They're on my property, Sandra. They're not in anyone's way. Especially not yours. This has happened more than once." She glanced up for a brief moment, her expression smug. "Well, maybe if you didn't put them so close to the curb, I wouldn't have to deal with them. Honestly, they're ugly anyway. I'm doing you a favor." The audacity in her voice made Alex's blood boil. But he kept his composure. "I'm just asking for a little respect here. These lights aren't cheap. And I don't think it's too much to ask you to be careful." Sandra shrugged, a smug grin on her face. "Whatever. Just move them if it's that big of a deal." As she turned to walk back inside, Alex stood there, speechless. It was clear that Sandra didn't care about his property or his concerns. In her mind, she was untouchable. And her entitled attitude made it obvious, she wasn't going to change unless someone forced her to. Determined to get some help, Alex decided to go straight to the HOA, hoping they would finally put an end to Sandra's reckless behavior. He scheduled a meeting with the president, Tom, a man who had lived in the neighborhood for years and was known for being an easygoing guy. Alex figured this might be the solution. After all, the HOA was supposed to protect residents from these kinds of problems. The day of the meeting, Alex arrived early. his mind racing with how he would explain the ongoing issue. When the time came, he sat across from Tom, who listened intently as Alex recounted the incidents, showing pictures of the broken lights and describing Sandra's dismissive attitude. Alex made sure to emphasize how the situation wasn't just an accident, it was clear that Sandra was purposefully damaging his property. Tom rubbed his temples, looking less than thrilled to be dealing with the issue. "Look, Alex," he said with a sigh. "I understand your frustration. But it's just some driveway lights. It's not a huge deal. Why don't you just move them further from the curb?" Alex stared at him, shocked. "It's not the lights, Tom. It's about respect. She's destroying my property." Tom leaned back in his chair, barely making eye contact. "I get it. But there's nothing much we can do about how people drive. Maybe you should just compromise and move the lights." Alex's frustration boiled over. "Compromise? I'm not the one running over the lights. She's the one doing this repeatedly. And now I'm getting the blame." Tom shrugged, uninterested in pursuing the matter any further. "I'm afraid there's not much we can do here, Alex. Just move the lights, and it'll be fine." The conversation ended there, with no action taken, no solution offered, and no apology for Sandra's behavior. Alex walked out of the HOA office, feeling even more defeated. The one place he thought would stand up for him had dismissed his concerns as trivial. Sandra had clearly gotten away with this, and now it seemed like no one was going to stop her. Frustrated and feeling backed into a corner, Alex knew he couldn't just let this go. The HOA had made it clear they weren't going to help, and Sandra's behavior showed no signs of stopping. He needed to take matters into his own hands, and he wasn't going to just replace his driveway lights with the same flimsy plastic ones that Sandra had been running over. No. This time, he was going to make sure they were built to withstand anything. After days of research, Alex finally found the solution: industrial-grade, reinforced steel driveway lights. These weren't your average lights, they were heavy-duty, designed to survive vehicle impacts. But Alex didn't stop there. He wasn't going to risk Sandra simply shrugging off these new lights the way she had done with the old ones. He needed to make sure they were virtually indestructible. So, he went even further. He dug deep holes at each light's base and filled them with concrete, reinforcing them with steel rebar. These weren't just lights anymore, they were solid barriers, designed to take the full force of a car without budging an inch. The installation process took Alex a few late nights, carefully placing each steel-reinforced light into the ground, making sure they were positioned exactly where Sandra had been driving over them. When the job was finally done, Alex stepped back and surveyed his work. His driveway looked exactly the same as before, with a neat row of lights lining the edges. But beneath that surface, he knew these lights were a whole different beast. They weren't just for decoration anymore, they were there to make a statement. If Sandra thought she could keep running over his property, she was about to learn a hard lesson in respect. The very next morning, as Alex sipped his coffee from the porch, he saw Sandra's familiar oversized SUV barreling out of her driveway, heading straight toward the reinforced lights. She had no idea what was waiting for her. Alex leaned back, watching with quiet anticipation. This time, there would be no broken plastic, only steel and concrete standing firm. As expected, Sandra's car came rushing toward the lights, her wheels crunching over the curb as she aimed for the same spot she had targeted countless times before. But when the front tire made contact with one of the industrial-grade lights, it wasn't the usual soft crunch of plastic shattering. Instead, there was a loud bang, the unmistakable sound of metal meeting metal. Sandra's SUV lurched violently to one side, and Alex could hear the tires skidding against the pavement as her car was jolted back. The front bumper slammed into the reinforced steel light, snapping off the lower portion of her bumper and leaving the tire completely flat. Sandra's SUV came to a screeching halt, rocking back and forth as if it couldn't quite believe what had just happened. For a moment, everything was eerily still. Then, the sound of scraping metal filled the air as Sandra clumsily got out of the car. Her face twisted in confusion and rage. Her eyes locked onto the damage, her once pristine bumper now hanging off the front of her SUV. The right front tire completely shredded. It was a disaster. Alex watched, barely able to hide his satisfaction as Sandra took a few shaky steps around her car, inspecting the wreckage. She stood there for a few seconds, utterly stunned, as she realized just how badly her SUV had been damaged. With a furious roar, she kicked at the broken bumper, as though that would magically fix the situation. But it was clear, her precious SUV, which she'd always treated like a queen's chariot, was now a crumpled, twisted mess. And the best part, Alex had it all on video. The entire neighborhood had witnessed the scene unfold from their windows and porches, whispering and exchanging knowing glances as Sandra's humiliation played out in front of them. It wasn't just her car that was damaged, it was her reputation, too. Alex could already hear the murmurs of the neighbors, some of them already making their way to the street to see the spectacle up close. The tow truck was on its way. But Sandra's damage, both to her car and her ego, was irreparable. After Sandra's humiliating incident, Alex wasted no time. He knew that the evidence he had could not only put an end to Sandra's reign of entitlement but also show the entire neighborhood who was really in the wrong. He immediately sent the video footage to the HOA, along with a detailed email outlining Sandra's long history of reckless behavior. But Alex didn't stop there. He made sure to CC every board member, every neighbor who had ever witnessed Sandra's behavior, and anyone who had been affected by her bullying tactics. The video spread like wildfire. Neighbors shared it, and soon everyone in the community was talking about the incident. People who had once been intimidated by Sandra's position in the HOA were now openly mocking her. The tables had turned. No one was afraid of her anymore. And it was clear that the HOA had no choice but to take action. Within days, the HOA held an emergency meeting. Sandra showed up, expecting to continue with her usual act of dominance. But the moment she stepped into the room, she could tell something was different. The board members, who had once been her allies, now sat stiffly in their chairs, avoiding her gaze. The video had done its job. Sandra's reputation had crumbled. And the HOA president, Tom, wasn't there to protect her this time. "Do you have any idea what kind of mess you've created?" Tom asked, his voice uncharacteristically stern. Sandra tried to play the victim, but it was no use. The board had already seen the video. There was no denying it. Sandra had been deliberately damaging Alex's property for months. And now, she was facing the consequences of her actions. The board members stared at her, shaking their heads in disbelief. "We have security footage, financial records, and numerous complaints about you," one of the board members added. "You've been misusing HOA funds for personal landscaping projects. And now this." Sandra's face went pale as the weight of the situation sank in. She tried to argue, but it was clear she had no ground to stand on. The HOA imposed a hefty $5,000 fine for repeated property damage and reckless driving within the neighborhood. But that wasn't all. An investigation into her misuse of HOA funds had begun. And it was only a matter of time before legal consequences followed. The board had turned on her, and there was no way back. The final blow came when Sandra, unable to recover from the scandal, decided to put her house up for sale. The once untouchable queen of the HOA was now just another neighbor, one who had lost her power and influence. Alex watched as the for sale sign went up in front of Sandra's house, knowing that the neighborhood was finally free of her toxic presence. As the days passed, Sandra's downfall became the talk of the block. No one pitied her. In fact, some neighbors even made light of her situation, joking about how karma had finally caught up with her. Alex couldn't help but feel a sense of victory. Not only had he reclaimed his peace, but he had also exposed Sandra for the entitled bully she truly was. And the best part, Sandra was gone for good. Her damaged car, her tarnished reputation, and the $5,000 fine were now her problems to deal with. Alex, on the other hand, was left with a quiet, peaceful neighborhood and a newfound respect from his neighbors. The HOA had learned its lesson. And for the first time in years, Alex could finally enjoy his home without worrying about the chaos Sandra had caused. If you've enjoyed this story and can relate to the satisfaction of seeing karma finally take its course, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever dealt with a neighbor like Sandra? Or maybe you've had your own encounter with a difficult HOA? Leave your comments below, let us know what you think. And if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss another story like this. Your support keeps me going and motivates me to bring you more of these incredible tales. Thanks for watching. And I can't wait to share the next one with you.